Breaking news! Over the last 2 games, something has clearly changed with the Philadelphia Eagles offense. And if you've been watching closely, you can feel it in the eye test, in the energy, and in the way this team takes the field. This offense is no longer operating the same way it did earlier in the season, and the results back that up. Even in the loss to the Los Angeles Chargers, despite Jalen Hurts turning the ball over 5 times, the concepts, the structure, and the overall offensive approach looked different. Something new was being built. And then came the game against the Raiders, a dominant 31-0 victory where everything clicked. Rhythm, execution, confidence. It was an Eagles team that looked like its best version. And the question echoing inside the building, in the locker room, and among all of us who live and breathe this team is simple. What changed? And even more important, who is driving this transformation? That's exactly what we're breaking down in today's video. If you bleed green, make sure to smash that like button to support the channel, and let's dive into this new era of Eagles football. The conversation keeps circling back to one name, Scott Loeffler. He's the Eagles quarterbacks coach, hired this offseason by Nick Sirianni after replacing Doug Nussmeier, who left to join the New Orleans Saints alongside Kellen Moore. When Hurts spoke to the media recently, he offered a rare glimpse behind the curtain. Hurts doesn't hand out praise lightly, but he went out of his way to call Loeffler a smart football mind and openly expressed hope that the Eagles can keep him around. That alone raised eyebrows, especially considering how much more efficient and decisive the offense has looked in recent weeks. Loeffler's resume matters here. This is not a coach learning on the fly. He was the head coach at Bowling Green from 2019 through 2024, where he orchestrated a real turnaround, leading the program to back-to-back bowl appearances for the first time in nearly a decade. His teams improved their win totals 3 straight seasons and produced consecutive 7-win campaigns. Before that, he served as an offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at multiple college programs, including Temple, Auburn, Virginia Tech, and Boston College. Earlier in his career, he worked at Michigan, where he helped develop quarterbacks like Tom Brady and Brian Griese, focusing heavily on mechanics and fundamentals. This is a coach who has called plays, built offenses, and understands quarterback play at a deep level. What makes this especially interesting is how certain concepts from Loeffler's past are now showing up in Philadelphia. Against the Raiders, the Eagles ran a tight end shovel pitch that looked nearly identical to a play Loeffler used at Bowling Green with Harold Fannin. Dallas Goedert was put in motion, hidden behind the offensive line, and fed the ball in traffic for a touchdown. This wasn't a one-off. Similar concepts showed up earlier in the season as well, using motion, misdirection, and timing to stress defenses. It's old school in its roots, reminiscent of Andy Reid's shovel pitch designs, but modern in its execution. There's also been a noticeable shift in how the Eagles are attacking defenses structurally. Against Las Vegas, Philadelphia ran its lowest rate of hitch routes and its highest rate of crossers all season. Earlier in the year, the Eagles leaned heavily on hitches, to the point of predictability, with A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert all ranking among league leaders in hitch usage. Against the Raiders, that changed. The ball moved through the middle of the field. Defenders were forced to cover horizontally and vertically. The result was the most efficient quarterback performance of the 2025 season and the best game of Hurts' career. 12 of 15 passing, 175 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and a 154.9 passer rating. This didn't happen by accident. There has also been chatter that Loeffler has had increased involvement in red zone design, which would make sense given his experience. Inside the 20-yard line, the Eagles have been the top red zone offense in the NFL all season, scoring touchdowns roughly 69% of the time. Coaching staffs are collaborative by nature, and with a young offensive coordinator in place, it's logical to lean on a veteran voice like Loeffler in high-leverage situations. The last 2 games showed smarter sequencing, better balance between run and pass, and more creativity near the goal line. Another detail that stands out is the increased use of Jalen Hurts as a runner. At Bowling Green, Loeffler wasn't afraid to feature the quarterback in the run game, and over the past 2 weeks, Hurts has looked more dynamic and decisive with his legs. Under center efficiency improved, the offense felt more modern, and the rhythm was undeniable. Add in discipline, with a season-low 3 penalties and 0 turnovers against the Raiders, and you're looking at a unit that appears refocused and retooled. Nick Sirianni deserves credit here as well. Rather than stubbornly sticking with what wasn't working earlier in the year, adjustments were made. The staff leaned into collaboration, trusted experience, and changed the approach. That flexibility may be what ultimately defines this stretch of the season. If what we've seen over the last 2 games is a sign of things to come, then this offensive evolution could be one of the most important developments of the year. So now it comes back to you. Watching these changes unfold, do you believe Scott Loeffler's influence is the key reason the Eagles' offense has finally found its groove? Or do you see this as a broader shift driven by Sirianni and the entire staff working together? What do you think is really behind this offensive turnaround? What makes this stretch so important is not just what worked against the Raiders, but what it represents moving forward. This offense didn't suddenly discover something fluky or gimmicky. What we're seeing is a return to principles that stress defenses mentally and physically, and that's why this feels sustainable. The Eagles are no longer asking Jalen Hurts to be perfect on every snap or forcing the same concepts over and over. Instead, they are putting him in positions to make quick decisions, to play fast, and to punish defenses for overcommitting. That's a huge philosophical shift compared to what frustrated fans earlier in the season. When you go back and look at the Chargers game, even with the turnovers, the signs were already there. The route combinations were cleaner. The spacing made more sense. Receivers were working across the field instead of constantly stopping and waiting on the ball. Against the Raiders, those same ideas were refined and executed at a much higher level. Hurts wasn't hesitating. He wasn't patting the ball. He knew where his answers were, and the offense flowed with purpose. That kind of clarity doesn't come from one good week of practice. It comes from structure and coaching alignment. Another underrated part of this shift is how it helps everyone else on the field. The offensive line benefits because quicker decisions mean less time in pass protection. The run game benefits because defenses can't just sit on predictable tendencies. Tight ends are more involved, which creates matchup problems, and receivers aren't being asked to win the same way on every snap. You could see the confidence build drive by drive against Las Vegas. This wasn't a team hoping the opponent would make mistakes. This was a team dictating terms. Red zone efficiency continues to be the backbone of this offense. Being the #1 red zone unit in the league doesn't happen by accident, especially in a season where consistency has been a challenge. Inside the 20, creativity matters more than raw talent, and that's where experience shows up. Motion, misdirection, and sequencing force defenses to hesitate for half a second, and that half second is the difference between a touchdown and a field goal. The Eagles have leaned into that, and it's paying off. There's also a psychological element here that shouldn't be ignored. Players feel when adjustments are made with intention. When something isn't working and the staff responds with solutions instead of stubbornness, buy-in increases. You could see that on the sideline. Communication looked cleaner. Corrections were happening in real time. Hurts looked comfortable talking through things, not just reacting. That's the sign of an offense that understands what it's trying to do and why it's doing it. This doesn't mean everything is fixed forever. The league adjusts quickly, and defenses will study this tape. But the difference now is that the Eagles are showing they can evolve. They're not locked into one identity. They're willing to pull from different influences within their own building, and that's what good teams do as the season progresses. Collaboration isn't weakness, it's strength, especially when it leads to clarity and efficiency like we just saw. The challenge now is consistency. Can this version of the offense show up again? Can it handle adversity when a game doesn't start smoothly? Can these concepts hold up against stronger defenses that won't roll over the way the Raiders did? Those questions will define what this stretch ultimately means. But for the first time in a while, there's real evidence that the Eagles aren't just surviving week to week. They're learning, adjusting, and improving. This feels like a turning point, not because of one blowout win, but because of how intentional the changes look. The foundation is there. The structure is there. Now it's about stacking performances and proving that this isn't a short-term spark, but a legitimate evolution of the offense. If you want to keep following this story as it develops, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Drop a like on the video if this breakdown helped you see the game differently. And keep watching because there's a lot more to unpack as this season moves forward. The reason this moment matters so much is because it tells us how this coaching staff responds when pressure is real. Earlier in the season, the criticism was loud, and for good reason. The offense felt rigid, predictable, and at times disconnected from the strengths of its own personnel. What we're seeing now suggests that the Eagles didn't ignore that reality. They confronted it. Instead of forcing Jalen Hurts to operate within concepts that weren't maximizing him, they reshaped the offense around timing, movement, and decisiveness. That's how you get a quarterback playing free instead of thinking through every throw. There's also a bigger picture element here that fans shouldn't overlook. This is what a healthy offensive ecosystem looks like. It's not one voice dominating everything. It's experienced coaches contributing where their strengths lie, younger coaches learning, and the head coach overseeing the balance. Scott Loeffler doesn't need to be labeled as the guy running the offense for his impact to be real. Influence shows up in details, in sequencing, in red zone ideas, and in how a quarterback carries himself. Over the last 2 games, those details have been sharper across the board. What stood out most against the Raiders wasn't just efficiency, it was control. The Eagles controlled tempo. They controlled field position. They controlled mistakes. 0 turnovers and a season-low penalty count tell you this team was locked in mentally. That's not random. That's preparation meeting execution. And when you combine that with creative play design and smarter tendencies, you get a performance that feels authoritative instead of desperate. Now comes the most important part of all of this: sustaining it. Anyone can look good for 1 or 2 weeks. Good teams look good when opponents adjust. The tape is out now. Defenses will be ready for more motion, more crossers, and a quarterback who's willing to hurt them with his legs again. The Eagles' response to that adjustment will tell us everything about how real this transformation is. But at least now, they've given themselves answers. They've shown flexibility. They've shown growth. For a fan base that demands accountability and evolution, this is exactly what you want to see. Not excuses, not stubbornness, adjustments backed by results. If this offense continues to build on what we've seen, then this stretch could be remembered as the moment the season truly turned in the right direction. Now I want to hear from you. Do you believe this offensive shift is something the Eagles can carry forward consistently, or do you still need to see more before buying in completely? Let your thoughts be known in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, hit that like button if this breakdown helped you, and stay tuned because there's much more Eagles coverage coming up next on the screen. What also deserves attention is how intentional the Eagles have been with situational football during this stretch. This isn't just about early down play calling or explosive concepts. Third downs have felt more manageable. Red zone snaps have looked calmer. There's less panic when something doesn't hit immediately. That tells you the offense knows where it wants to go next, and that kind of sequencing is a direct reflection of preparation during the week. When coaches understand how one concept sets up the next, the entire unit plays with more confidence. You can feel that trust building between Jalen Hurts and the structure around him. He's not forcing throws just because a look was predetermined. He's taking what the defense gives him, and when nothing is there, he's using his legs decisively instead of drifting or hesitating. That balance is critical. Hurts at his best has always been a quarterback who punishes defenses for overplaying coverage, and over the last 2 games, defenses have paid for it. This is the version of Hurts the Eagles need if they're going to be dangerous down the stretch. Another subtle but important change is how the offense is dictating matchups instead of reacting to them. Motion isn't being used just for window dressing. It's being used to reveal coverage, to create leverage, and to put defenders in conflict. Tight ends are becoming more than safety valves. They're becoming weapons again. When defenses have to respect that, everything else opens up. That's how you keep opponents guessing and prevent them from sitting on tendencies. What's encouraging is that none of this feels like a complete overhaul. It feels like refinement. The core identity of the team hasn't changed. The Eagles still want to be physical. They still want balance. They still want to control games. But now, they're doing it with more imagination and better rhythm. That's the difference between an offense that survives and one that can carry a team when it needs to. The next step is proving that this approach holds up when things get uncomfortable. When the score is tight, when the crowd is hostile, when an early mistake tests the offense's composure. That's where true growth shows up. But for the first time in a while, there's a clear sense that the Eagles have tools to respond instead of reverting to habits that weren't working. This is why these last 2 games matter so much beyond the box score. They represent a willingness to adapt and a commitment to doing what's best for the players on the field. That's how teams evolve over the course of a season, and that's how trust between coaches and players strengthens. If this continues, the Eagles won't just be a team that wins games. They'll be a team no one wants to face when it matters most. One more layer to this that can't be ignored is how all of this reshapes the identity of the Eagles heading into the most important part of the season. Identity isn't just about scheme, it's about how a team responds when opponents know what's coming. Earlier in the year, defenses looked comfortable against Philadelphia. They anticipated tendencies, sat on routes, and dared the Eagles to beat them a different way. Over the last few games, that comfort is gone. Defenses are hesitating again, and hesitation is exactly what this offense needs to thrive. You can see it in how linebackers are reacting to motion, how safeties are forced to hold their depth a fraction longer, and how pass rushers can't just pin their ears back. When an offense makes defenders think instead of react, everything slows down in the Eagles' favor. That's why the passing windows look cleaner and why the run game benefits even when it's not the primary focus. Football is connected, and right now, the connections are finally lining up. This also reframes how we should evaluate this coaching staff as a whole. Growth during the season matters. Adjustments matter. No staff gets everything right from week 1, but the good ones respond. What we're watching now is a response. It's a staff that recognized stagnation and chose collaboration over ego. That matters in a locker room full of veteran leaders who know when something isn't working. Respect is earned when solutions follow problems, and that respect shows up on Sundays. The confidence level of this team feels different. Not loud, not reckless, just steady. There's a calmness to how the offense is operating, especially in critical moments. That's often the biggest sign that players trust the plan. When trust exists, execution improves. When execution improves, confidence compounds. That's the cycle the Eagles are trying to lock into right now. None of this guarantees anything. The NFL doesn't hand out future results based on recent progress, but what it does provide is belief rooted in evidence, not hope. The Eagles have shown they can identify issues, adapt their approach, and play efficient, disciplined football against an opponent they were supposed to dominate. That might sound basic, but it's something that had been missing at times earlier in the year. Now the challenge is simple, even if the task isn't. Do it again, and then do it again after that. Stack good weeks. Stay flexible. Stay self-aware. If this offense continues on this path, the ceiling of this team rises significantly because the defense already knows how to carry its weight. Balance is what wins in this league, and balance is finally starting to show up on both sides of the ball. That's why this stretch feels meaningful, not just encouraging. It feels like a foundation instead of a flash, and foundations are what seasons are built on. I want to know how you're feeling about this version of the Eagles offense right now. Do you believe this is the true turning point of the season, or are you waiting for more proof before fully buying in? Drop your thoughts in the comments, make sure you're subscribed, leave a like if this breakdown helped you, and keep watching because more Eagles content is coming up next on the screen. Earlier in the year, defenses looked comfortable against Philadelphia. They anticipated tendencies, sat on routes, and dared the Eagles to beat them a different way. Over the last few games, that comfort is gone. Defenses are hesitating again, and hesitation is exactly what this offense needs to thrive. You can see it in how linebackers are reacting to motion, how safeties are forced to hold